So this weekend, something massive happened in college football. Something that many of us have been theorizing was on the horizon for quite some time, but it finally came to fruition. And of course, we're talking about USC and Lincoln Riley parting ways with Defensive Coordinator Alex Grinch and what this means. Before we can jump into all of this, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe this will provide solutions for USC? I can't wait to hear from you. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below as those interactions are massive. And we're less than 50 subscribers away from our 20,000 sub mark. I'd love to have you a part of this unbelievable community. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And to start this off, we have got to reference a tweet from none other than Brett McMurphy, where he states, USC defensive coordinator Alex Grinch has been fired. Defensive line coach Sean Nua and inside linebacker coach Brian Odom will serve as interim co-defensive coordinators. So this is something we have got to watch. Now listen, I've been saying since before the year started that the biggest question for USC is how their defense would improve. Because if we look historically at Alex Grinch, and we do have a fairly large sample size, his defenses haven't been the best. In fact, if you want to go back to his defense that was the best, you have to go back almost a decade to when he was at Washington State. The tenure at Ohio State didn't end up working out. The tenure at Oklahoma didn't end up working out. And inevitably, the tenure at USC didn't end up working out. And it brings nobody any happiness to see anybody get fired, but there was no question what the weak part of USC's team was. They had a defense that, quite frankly, couldn't stop a runny nose, and it was evident. You didn't have to just look at the stats. All you had to do was watch the games to see how deficient that defense was, especially, like in my case, if I just got done watching a team like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, teams that actually play defense, and then I'd watch USC. Caleb Williams is unbelievable. What an unbelievable quarterback he is. And this Lincoln Riley offense is still very dangerous. Now, I have some questions about it, and we'll talk about that, but there was no question that the weak part of USC was the defense, and personally, I've been championing that since last January. I have been pointing out that you cannot be one-dimensional and win a national championship. It just hasn't happened. Since 2000, the worst scoring defense we've seen win a national championship was 2010 Auburn. They came in at number 54 in the nation. To put that into perspective, USC was like 100th last year, and they're close to 100 this year. So it's just not happening. That's why USC is losing these games, because they are a one-sided team. They may have an unbelievable quarterback, but you cannot win major college football games being an incomplete team. And now USC is learning this lesson, where they are not a complete team, and teams that may not have a Caleb Williams are beating them. Because they're showing them, we don't have to have a Caleb Williams. You may have the most talented player on the field, that may be well and true. We have a football team. We got 22 guys that came here today to play. You have a collection of some very talented pieces, but are you a complete football team? And the answer was overwhelmingly no. Now, make no mistake, I believed USC could be one of those teams to be an outlier since 2000. I didn't think that USC needed a top 25, top 35, top 40 defense even to potentially win a national championship. But the problem is they weren't even close to that. And so Alex Grinch is no longer the defensive coordinator at USC. And in part, this is a good move because the defense was not working. And I personally pointed to the fact that he had already been a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten with a defense that handed him far more talent than he currently has at USC, with a defense that he inherited that was a top 25 unit in the nation, and it tanked with him as defensive coordinator. I asked the question, how is it going to go now that he doesn't have access to that talent? He has a strength and conditioning coach that has no ability to make his players physical, because USC consistently loses the battle of physicality. Offense, defense, special teams, that doesn't matter. That is a constant. And you have an offensive-minded head coach who's shown no respect for the defensive side of the ball. No respect for the physical nature that is the game of football. Everything is quick, fast, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and that's just not how the Big Ten is played. So I had serious questions about how USC would work going to the Big Ten, and this certainly provides one answer. But as I alluded to earlier in this video, I have other questions. And don't get me wrong, I have defended Lincoln Riley in a lot of capacities, but now I have other questions that must be answered. Because if this same premise continues of the Benny Wiley strength and conditioning program, I don't know that it matters what defensive coordinator you're going to get. If you don't want your defensive linemen to be over 300 pounds, they might get manhandled in the Big Ten. So there have got to be changing of mindsets at USC. Changing of coaches is great, but there has got to be a changing of the mindset, and that's deeper than Alex Grinch. Understand this now. You have provided a solution, but there are still multiple solutions that need to show themselves, and in no way, shape, or form am I saying they won't. I'm not saying that Lincoln isn't going to make those moves once the season ends. That's not my contention here whatsoever. So please do not be misunderstood into thinking that. My contention here is this is step one. There are more steps that need to happen. For instance, Lincoln Riley right now has one of the better running backs in all of college football, but the average college football fan may not know that. Why? Because they just don't use him. Young man is averaging over 5 yards per carry and is getting, 10 attempts a game? Everything runs through Caleb Williams. But I have a question for all USC fans. If Caleb Williams isn't there, what do you do? And understand, I'm not saying you don't have other 5-star quarterbacks. I like Miller Moss. I think Malachi Nelson's going to be a dude. Caleb was Superman. Caleb did things most other quarterbacks couldn't, and Caleb won them a lot of games that they probably shouldn't have won. What do you do without that guy? This gets me into the crux of my main question. Is Lincoln Riley going to change the way in which he builds rosters? Because he's already showed us he's changing how he values defense, which is great. That is necessary. Will he change the way he builds rosters? And this is why I asked that question. Because traditionally, Lincoln Riley will take a recruiting class of 16 guys and then get 15 more guys in the transfer portal. He'll have a top 25 class in recruiting and a top 10 class in transfer portal acquisitions. I don't know if that's the recipe in the Big Ten. Lincoln is not the only one that utilizes the transfer portal, far from it. But now I'm of the mindset that Lincoln may have to adapt the way in which he recruits in combination with the transfer portal, because now he's playing a different brand of football. Now you're playing Big Ten ball. And there's a lot of questions for USC. This certainly answers one of them. But there are several more questions I personally have. What are you going to do with your strength and conditioning program? Because you are losing the battle of physicality. That's on offense, that's on defense, that's on special teams. That's not all on Alex Grinch. That's your strength and conditioning program, which, by the way, same strength and conditioning program we'd always talk about at Oklahoma, where they would lose the battle of physicality. And I hate to make this argument, but 1 dot is meaningless. What I mean when I say that is if this was a one-off, where it was just 1 year where a Lincoln Riley coach team was losing the battle of physicality, it would be meaningless because it's 1 dot. Several dots create a line. And right now, we have a line. Lines don't arise for no reason. They mean something. Now, that's not to say that I don't think Lincoln Riley is still a head coach that everybody needs to be respectful of in terms of he can come into your house and put it on you. I completely agree with that. He's a brilliant offensive mind. But there are things and truths in football that have proved to be constants. And they've proved to be constants for a reason. And my big question for all of you, how will Lincoln Riley address those constants? Can't wait to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.